All right, so we got a banger by Mr. Headcanon talking about the rise of Invincible. So I think he's going to talk about how it's basically, as a comic book franchise, getting ready to surpass like Marvel and DC. So it comes from a franchise called Image Comics, kind of like the way The Boys isn't a part of any of these corporate franchises. It's a part of a franchise called Dynamite Comics. Honestly, I kind of see where he's going with this, but like, let's just let him tell the story. So let's get into it.
Marvel and DC have the most popular superheroes in the world, but a writer who left Marvel through the back door created an independent superhero that beat them all. Today, we're going to see how Robert Kirkman turned Invincible into a pop culture icon, and how this character got his own show and video game without the marketing or budget of the big publishers or major studios. This is the rise of... It all started in 2003 when Kirkman published an all-new story for Image Comics. At first, it seemed like just another superhero comic, a story you'd read 1,000 times before. Mark Grayson was the son of the world's most important hero, and in the first issue, he discovered that he had powers just like his dad. He decided to become a superhero to help others, but he struggled to balance his daily life with his new unpaid job. He had relationship problems and worked alongside the Justice League, the Guardians of the Globe. But the key difference was the publisher behind the comic. Image allowed Kirkman to create his own universe from scratch and keep the rights to all his characters. This would never have happened at Marvel or DC, where the company holds the rights to everything their writers create.
I don't get it.
This meant Kirkman could
That's actually insane.
do whatever he wanted, from showing explicit violence to killing off characters permanently. But the best part was that he had complete creative control over what happened with Invincible outside of comics. If that hadn't been the case, the franchise would have been completely different, and the Prime Video show might never have existed, but working with Image had a downside. Since it was an independent publisher, it didn't have the same advertising budget as the big two, so Invincible wasn't a big seller in its early issues. It also didn't help that it wasn't radically different from what Marvel and DC were offering, so the comic didn't stand out.
That's facts. I think it almost got canceled right before Omni-Man does the flip. It was like 15 issues in. Like in the show, it happens like right off the bat, which is honestly a better writing choice, but in the comic it takes like a while.
Kirkman admitted that when issue 6 came out, they were only selling between 4,000 and 5,000 copies. Those were cancellation numbers at the time. It looked like Invincible wouldn't even make it to issue 10, but they were quite literally saved by the power of writing. At the end of the first arc, it was revealed that Omni-Man wasn't Earth's protector after all. He was actually an alien infiltrator, secretly preparing the planet for his empire's evil invasion. Omni-Man killed the Guardians and fought his own son, completely catching readers off guard, because twists like this didn't exist in superhero comics. These days, the idea of an evil Superman is a walking cliche, but back then, The Boys, Irredeemable, and Injustice hadn't even started yet. The evil Superman trope exists because of Invincible.
I did not know that.
From that moment on, word of mouth was great. Critics loved it, and sales started to climb. Kirkman used the same tactic as Stan Lee back in...
It's even funny, like all the evil Superman stories like that he has are from this. Like even All-Star Superman is literally inspired from this.
In the day, responding to letters and adding prologues in his comics, making readers feel more connected to the author. It gave people a sense of being part of a new fandom. Once Invincible surpassed 20,000 copies sold per issue, Kirkman knew it was serious business, and saw that the franchise had a bright future. But nothing was guaranteed yet. In 2004, Kirkman joined Marvel, hoping to gain more exposure as a writer through the publisher's publicity machine. Plus, he also wanted to fulfill his dream of writing some of the world's most famous superheroes. While working on Invincible and The Walking Dead, Kirkman also wrote The Irredeemable Ant-Man, contributed to Marvel Zombies, did a few issues of Ultimate X-Men, and even worked on the main Captain America regular series. It was during this time that he wrote Marvel Team Up issue 14, where Invincible traveled to Universe 616, met the Avengers, and teamed up with Spider-Man to fight Dr. Octopus. These comics were good, but Kirkman wasn't happy.
I'm working for Nichols over here at Marvel, and I get treated like crap, and I get yelled at all the time.
During those years, Kirkman had a tense relationship with Joe Quesada, Marvel's editor-in-chief, because he couldn't do anything he wanted. He had to be super careful about which characters he used, how his stories affected canon, and even had to ask permission to give interviews and promote his comics. Since that didn't work for him and made him feel uncomfortable, he became a partner at Image in 2008. He left Marvel forever.
That's funny because in the Invincible comic, he literally takes like multiple issues. Like he'll take like a bunch of panels just to diss like major comic franchises. It's kind of funny.
To focus solely on his own comics, which were already bestsellers. He founded his own label called Skybound, which grew to include more than just comics. Now there are video games and all kinds of merchandise. We'll talk more about
Skybound is literally an animation studio now too. That's fire.
In a bit.
The question
I think they do
that
Invincible.
I was asked the most is
the
why
show.
did I leave Marvel Comics to do creator-owned work exclusively? I did it to save the entire comic book industry. Right now, the comic book industry is backwards. No one watches a movie and decides that they want to do movies and aspires to only ever do Pulp Fiction 2. And in the industry, the way it works right now is a lot of times guys come into creator-owned comics, like me, like Bendis, like Matt Fraction. We come into the comic book industry doing creator-owned work, and we eventually graduate up to Marvel, and then that's the end of the story. You make a good living, but at the end of the day, when you're hot, and when you're not, you're not. And when you're not hot, they don't want you, and your career is over, and that's bad for creators.
From then on, Invincible became a relentless, cliche-breaking machine. They redeemed their evil Superman in a way that had never been done before, explored the multiverse in a more interesting and coherent way than Marvel and DC, used time travel in a fun way, and even made a 3-issue arc that pretended to be a reboot. Without spoiling
That was
anything,
really funny.
It worked as a parody of what Marvel and DC did every year and a half, just to attract new readers. But in Invincible, it was way better, because the events of those issues actually affected the rest of the continuity. No wonder they called it the best superhero comic in the universe. They tackled serious themes, like whether superheroes should kill, dysfunctional families, abuse, abortion, and what happens when a superhero abandons their family for years, because they got trapped in another dimension. Since the regular series was
Bro, this is gonna make me read the comic again. It's so good.
handled by one person and wasn't meant to go on forever, Kirkman was able to evolve Mark's character, taking him from a high school student to a galactic... Better not tell you, so I don't spoil the whole show. He grows a lot, trust me. Along with
Nah, that nigga Mark becomes a dog in the end, bro. He ain't lying.
artists Ryan Otley and Cory Walker, Kirkman published 144 issues, something unheard of for an independent comic. It was already rare for a single writer to handle so many consecutive issues of a regular series, and even rarer for it to be a superhero story, but this creative team pulled it off. By the time the series ended in 2018, Invincible had become a hit among comic book readers thanks to its well-developed characters, unexpected plot twists, and its love for the superhero genre. Even though it was full of criticisms of Marvel and DC, Invincible breathed love for superheroes. It was perfect for new readers who just wanted a good story, but it was also refreshing for those who had been reading Marvel and DC comics their whole lives. But Invincible still wasn't mainstream. The comic sold well, but he wasn't a pop culture icon like Spider-Man or Batman. Between 2016 and 2019, superheroes were everywhere thanks to the success of the MCU. Even your mom picked a side in Civil War and cried over Iron Man's death in Endgame. But only comic book readers knew about Mark Grayson's adventures. Seeing the franchise's potential, Universal and Kirkman started talks about making a live-action Invincible movie, with Seth Rogen writing the script and Evan Goldberg directing. The two had worked on Preacher and would later do The Boys, so they seemed like the perfect team to bring Invincible to a massive audience for the first time. But production got indefinitely stalled, and to this day, nothing concrete has come from it.
Miss Brandt, get me a violin.
That's probably
It felt
for the
unfair
best.
that such a great story didn't get the same recognition as live-action superhero movies, which were breaking box office records every year, until the animated series arrived. Seeing the comic sales and the success of The Walking Dead adaptation on AMC, Prime Video decided to bring Invincible to life as an animated show.
I gotta read The
2021
Walking
was the
Dead.
perfect year to release it because people were craving more superhero content for adults. After Deadpool, The Boys, and The Umbrella Academy, which had a very good first season, Invincible had the chance to get a faithful adaptation with all the violence from the comics. By then, everyone knew superheroes weren't just for kids. And since superhero movies were at their peak, all of Invincible's criticisms of the genre's cliches were going to hit harder than ever. This was only possible because of Kirkman's supervision. Since he owned the rights to Invincible thanks to his deal with Image Comics, he was an executive producer on the series and made sure the adaptation lived up to the comics. Some dialogues and scenes were taken straight from the panels, but they also made changes to fit the TV format. At San Diego Comic-Con 2024, Kirkman said this: "We haven't left anything out of the show for space reasons. It's always for story reasons. For me, the making the show process has been like honing the story, improving the story."
Right. That's why when I saw someone comment on somewhere on the internet that like the writing in the show is better, and it's like it's literally the exact same writing. It's literally just rearranged so that people can watch it more coherently. And then they added some interesting things because like you can toss in Easter eggs in the show. You can kind of change some like writing mishaps that you might not have noticed the first time around in the comic, but it's very, very faithful to the comic. But at the same time, it's got a lot of like differences too that make it better, and it's really dope.
There's been a lot of opportunity to add more stuff to it. In the first issue of the comic, Kirkman included a flash.
But like, right, to finish that point, like people be like, it's the writing that's getting better in the show that's keeping the show going. I'm like, bro, the writing was already good in the comic. Like, it's not getting better. It's just fundamentally a very well written comic. It's not better written in the show.
forward scene to show Mark in his invincible suit right from the start. The idea was to make sure people knew immediately they were reading the right superhero comic and didn't get bored with Mark's everyday life before he got his powers. But the show opened with the introduction of the Guardians of the Globe, who had barely appeared in the comics. The rest of the episode followed Mark as he learned to use his powers and tried out different suits. He didn't put on the yellow suit until 35 minutes into the first episode. And here's where one of the biggest changes happened. Earlier, I mentioned that comic sales skyrocketed after Omni-Man's betrayal in issue 7. Knowing he couldn't risk making the same mistake and losing viewers, Kirkman shifted the twist up, making Omni-Man kill the Guardians at the end of the first episode. This completely changed the dynamic of the first arc.
See, not different, just rearranged so that people can have a better watching experience. And also, he might go back and realize, since that was the thing that spiked sales, I might want to put that up front instead. But like, the rest of the story is still there.
His fight with Mark still happened at the end of the season, but we, as the audience, already knew from the start that Nolan was a traitor. This made all his scenes with Mark and Debbie incredibly tense. And just like with the comic, word of mouth was huge after this scene. Amazon reported that Invincible became one of Prime Video's top 5 most watched series of 2021. It was on the same level as The Boys, despite having way less marketing and budget. The producers admitted that Amazon barely promoted the show and that its budget was less than a quarter of what they spent on The Boys. But since the show was amazing, people loved it. It had a 98% critic.
The problem is they literally never increased the budget because of that. They were like, well, if it's doing good at this budget, let's not increase it, which is why the animation keeps tanking, because they keep bringing on, the more characters that get introduced, they keep bringing on more amazing voice actors to communicate that amazing story, but they're not increasing budget to allow for like animation. So animation keeps suffering as they keep adding more and more voice actors. That's why we get Seth Rogen, we get J.K. Simmons, we just added Jeffrey Dean Morgan, bro. That's eating the budget. We have Sandra Oh on this mug. Sean Yoon is gonna keep eating the budget. That's why the animation sucks. People don't understand. That's why the animation sucks. And that's why it keeps getting worse, because they keep pulling resources and funds from literally every other thing to keep paying voice actors, because the story is the most important thing.
Approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Because it's not the animation.
Over 90% audience approval, and the last 2 episodes were among the highest rated on IMDb. Several scenes and memes went viral, and the reception was so good that Amazon quickly renewed the show for a 2nd and 3rd season. The key was the characters. While Disney was trying to convince us to watch every MCU project just to keep up with the multiverse saga, Invincible made us fall in love with its characters. Sure, the ultra-violent scenes were shocking, but Mark and Omni-Man's fight was heartbreaking. Not because of all the blood and destruction, but because we had spent time with these 2 characters and felt for Mark. If you take out the superhero elements, it's the story of a kid who just got betrayed by his father, something anyone can relate to.
Gonna cry?
Of course, this success wasn't just because of Kirkman. One of the executive producers from day one was Seth Rogen, the guy who was supposed to write the live-action movie and now voices Alan in the show. Rogen had worked in TV and film for years, so he helped a lot with adapting the comics concepts. Plus, the show had an all-star voice cast, including J.K. Simmons and Steven Yeun, which elevated the production and made Invincible stand out as a high-quality project. Invincible was finally mainstream. Thanks to the show's success, comic book sales skyrocketed, and the franchise gained an entire new generation of readers. Action figures were announced, tons of merchandise hit the market, and Kirkman's universe started becoming known even to people who had never stepped into a comic shop. Invincible was better than everything Marvel and DC had released in those years, and superhero fans started demanding this level of quality from all superhero projects. An independent hero had beaten the 2 biggest studios. Invincible was about to take over the world, but just like the Avatar, when the world needed him most, he vanished. Season 1 ended in April 2021, but for the rest of that year, there was no news about Invincible. Nothing in 2022 either. It wasn't until early 2023 that Prime Video dropped a teaser saying Season 2 was coming, but without a release date. At least it looked like the animation had improved, which maybe explained the delay. But
that was cap.
That wasn't the case, because they had hired a different animation studio just for the teaser.
Lies, lies, and more lies.
In mid-2023, they released an Adam Eve special that told her origin story, but not many people watched it. The episode was good, but the main character of the show only did a quick cameo in the final minutes, and Prime Video barely promoted it. They assumed fans would do all the work, like with Season 1, but that didn't happen, because the Invincible fan base had scattered since 2021. Many had already read the comic and lost interest in the show because they already knew what was going to happen. Others stopped talking about Invincible because so many superhero projects in theaters and streaming took the spotlight. Once the pandemic ended, Hollywood's production machine started cranking out content non-stop, and Invincible Season 1 was buried under hundreds of mediocre projects. It seemed like Season 2 would come and go unnoticed, but it was a hit again. again. The first episode tripled the premiere viewership of season 1. The fans showed up because this new season was just as good as the last. Once again, Invincible outdid Marvel and DC in handling its most important themes. Angstrom Levy, the season's villain, had the ability to travel across the multiverse, a concept that had been completely overused by the big studios by 2023. But it worked here, because the show never got lost in overly complicated explanations about how reality functioned. The focus was always on the characters from the main universe, on how
That's what makes its multiverse so much better than Marvel or even DC, bro. It's just character driven instead of like trying to create its own internal logic that it continuously breaks anyway.
how Mark had to learn to be a hero on his own without fearing he'd turn into his father, on how Debbie had to come to terms with spending 20 years with an alien conqueror who saw her as nothing more than a pet, on
Which is another thing they did way better in the show, I won't lie. Like, Debbie's character is redeemed a lot in the show.
how Eve had to learn to be responsible with her powers instead of just trying to prove her dad wrong, on how Omni-Man reflected on his life and realized he loved his son, even if he couldn't say it out loud because he was never raised to express his feelings.
Big Bad Bug got a bit of a soft spot, huh?
And sure, a few people complained about the pacing of season 2, noting it didn't have as much action as the first one. However, these moments made us care about the characters. That's why we felt something when they were in danger, whether it was from super-powered fights or getting left in a coma by a bunch of Viltrumites, like what happened to Alan. And once again, they improved the source material. They gave more screen time to Mark's mom, showing how she fell into alcoholism after her husband left. They expanded Donald's character,
Facts.
even though he was hardly significant in the comics.
Facts.
They kept shrinking Ray
That's
alive
another one.
so she could help develop Rex in season 3. And they didn't make Amber cheat on Mark just because she was horny while he was busy saving the world. But the best change was how Mark reacted when he reunited with his dad on Thraxia. In the comics, Mark immediately broke down crying and begged Nolan to come back to Earth so they could be a happy family again, as if nothing had happened. But in the show, Mark didn't trust his dad and only sided with him to protect his little brother. The show's version of Mark is much more mature, and the emotional weight of every episode is stronger. Same thing happened with Eve. In the comics, she tried to sabotage Mark and Amber's relationship to get with Mark herself. Then she threw herself at him 2 seconds after they broke up, only to start having doubts a few issues later. In the show, Eve never betrayed Amber and was way more consistent, struggling with her feelings from the beginning and wanting to take things slow. But why did it take so long to make season 2? According to Kirkman, the wait was so long because they wanted to maintain quality. But the truth is, they had to switch animation studios after the pandemic. They had to redo all the designs, basically starting the show from scratch. That's why the animation looks different and why they split season 2 into 2 parts with a 4-month gap in between. Kirkman said they did this so there would be new Invincible episodes every year starting in 2023. The second part dropped in early 2024. The third season arrived in 2025, and the fourth season is supposed to come in 2026. But I have
good
a
at
feeling
least.
they split the season due to time constraints, making it a way to buy more time to finish the episodes. But hey, that's just my theory. With the success of season 2, Prime Video announced that they were renewing the show for a 4th and 5th season. Kirkman's dream was about to come true, since he wanted Invincible to last 7 or 8 seasons, to adapt the entire comic. On top of that, Skybound announced and developed the franchise's first video game, Guarding the Globe, an RPG for mobile devices featuring a completely new story that expanded the series canon. In this squad-based combat game, the world's most powerful heroes teamed up with Cecil Stedman to fight a deadly army of clones. It didn't make as much noise as the show, but fans received it well. Also, the game is full of Easter eggs and references, which are always appreciated. And if that wasn't enough, Omni-Man was added as a playable character in Mortal Kombat 1.
Peak.
And Skybound announced they were working on a brand new AAA game, though we don't have any details yet. With a bit of luck, they'll release a Superman game before Warner does.
Oh, is that the open world Invincible game that everyone's talking about? Bro, that's gonna break everything. So if they do that, and then they do get the live action film, I could see this genuinely like surpassing Marvel, like the MCU, with literally just 1 or 2 movies. Like do like an Invincible Part 1, and then do like a Guarding the Globe movie, or do like a Tech Jack movie, or Spawn. Spawn is literally in the Image franchise, and he's a part of the Invincible universe. Like he literally appears in the comic. This would be a perfect opportunity to bring Spawn back, actually.
I hope so.
But not everything was perfect. No matter what Prime Video's numbers say, it was obvious that season 2 didn't have the same cultural impact as the first. A lot of people were frustrated with how long they had to wait, and Kirkman realized he had to change his strategy if he wanted to keep the fandom engaged. The only way Prime Video would keep approving new seasons was if ratings stayed high. If viewership started dropping season after season, they would cancel the show, just like what almost happened to the comic when no one was buying it. But just like he had done throughout his career, Kirkman learned and adapted. They released released the teaser for Season 3 6 months after Season 2 ended, instead of waiting years like before. And this time, they directly responded to the criticism. Sissel told Mark that nobody liked his 4-month break, referring to the season split. And in the title card, they made it clear they wouldn't do it again, acknowledging that they messed up. Just like in the early days, Kirkman spoke directly to the fans, admitted his mistakes, and promised to change things to keep everyone happy. That's something you never see at Marvel or DC. And to add to the fun, they included a reference to one of the show's most famous memes in this teaser.
Where's Mark, William?
This might seem like just a joke, but it plays a key role in understanding the franchise's success. Invincible has such a loyal fan base not just because the show is great, but because its creators actually embrace the fandom. Instead of mocking the fans or acting like they're smarter than their audience, they engage with them. While MCU directors proudly say they've never read a comic in their life, and the director of Secret Invasion blamed fans for the show's failure, the people behind Invincible listen. The official Instagram account posts memes.
I never thought about that. A large part of like why the MCU has like lost favor, I won't say it's like tanking. Honestly, it's hard for me to tell until like maybe a few more movies are done, like this next phase. But one thing's for certain, they don't care about what the consumer wants, like at all. And it's definitely a flaw that the Invincible franchise kind of flips against them and uses to their advantage.
That you'd expect from an influencer, not a multi-million-dollar franchise. But the casual, fun tone suits Invincible perfectly, as it has always been partly a parody. So, of course, Season 3 was bound to be a success, and that's exactly what happened. They adapted Cecil's betrayal, Alan and Nolan's escape, and delivered an incredible episode featuring Powerplex, one of the most emotional stories in the whole show. They kept the focus on—
oh my god, they did Powerplex really well in the show, bro. And that's another voice actor that they had to get. Aaron Paul ain't cheap, gang, but it makes the story so peak. I could not imagine anyone doing Powerplex except Aaron Paul now, and it makes me want to go reread the comic just so I could get to the Powerplex issues and then like read it with Aaron Paul's voice in my head, bro. That shit is peak.
Character development, which has always been the core of the show. The dynamic between Debbie, Mark, and Oliver is crucial. At first, Mark's little brother could be pretty annoying, but as the episodes progressed, we understood him better. Even if you don't like Oliver, you can still feel for Mark, who's struggling to juggle his superhero duties and personal life. He has to chase after his brother to make sure he doesn't screw up, support his mom, be a good boyfriend, and save the world. And if that weren't enough, Oliver challenges his entire moral code by asking why it's wrong to kill villains, and Mark doesn't know how to answer.
Killing is wrong and bad.
For the third time, they changed and improved things from the comics. In episode 2, they took elements from issue 50, where Kirkman revealed Cecil's origin story, but they made it even better. In the comics, Cecil was captured by 2 villains who were planning to release a deadly gas, and a superhero named Britt saved him. But in the show, he took charge of the entire mission. We got to see how he surprised them, and how he had to figure out a way to save the day. They even added a hand-to-hand fight scene that wasn't in the comics. Also, the scene of Cecil in prison originally lasted only 1 page, but the show expanded it to show how he transformed the entire facility.
Peak.
In his interactions with the giant sumo wrestler, we saw that he always knew how to handle metahumans, even though he didn't have powers himself. This is key for the rest of the episode, where we see him confronting Mark and intimidating the Guardians. This season is just as good as the previous ones, and with Conquest around the corner, the hype for Invincible is off the charts. Everyone knows the show is going to break the internet again when these two finally face off, in what promises to be one of the greatest battles in animation history.
I'll be damned if I didn't get really turned on.
This season confirms that Invincible is one of the best things to ever happen to the superhero genre, and proves that quality should always come first. Not just animation quality. Let's be honest, the animation in this show is pretty average, and at times, even below mediocre. But because the story is so well written, and the characters are so well developed, the show has built a solid fandom, and surpassed Marvel and DC.
Like, the animation literally doesn't even matter. It's such a moot point. Like, people, like, if we're talking about the animation as fans, we're just like making jokes or just talking about like the state of the animation in terms of like it could be better, they could hire more people, they could get better resources, they could pay their animators better, they could give them more time. But like no one really cares if it's good or not, except people who like are really coping and trying to call it good. Like, people were trying to tell me like the animation in episode 8 was like good. It was better than the rest of season 3, but like great animation, bro. I don't know, bro. That's a lot. That's a reach.
There aren't toxic
For me
fan wars
personally.
over Invincible. People don't constantly criticize the creators' decisions, because you can tell these guys actually love
Exactly.
superheroes. None of this would have been possible
Like, the only arguments are like, is the animation good amongst fans? And it's like, that's very mild.
without the passion of its creators, and the creative freedom Kirkman had from the beginning. That's what allowed him to build this universe without ridiculous editorial restrictions.
I love comics. I love everything about them. I love everyone who reads them, and I love everyone who does them. I just want to make sure that my great-great-grandchildren children can still read the same medium that I grew up loving. Comics will survive.
But as much as I love Invincible, it's unacceptable that Marvel and DC still can't pull off something like this. Though that could change this year. If James Gunn gets it right with Superman and Peacemaker Season 2, DC might finally beat Marvel and take over the world again. Something that hasn't happened since Nolan's Batman. We explain how they can do it in this video over here.
I'm gonna have to
From
watch
this
that.
moment, I will stand for the opposite of killing.
Peacemaker is the best thing DC's made in a while, and the Superman movie has an opportunity to be absolutely peak as well. I don't know about Marvel. Marvel might actually fall to third place. Like, I could see the Invincible universe with Image Comics coming to like first place. I could see DC taking a very strong second place. And if the boys have a really good season 5, which actually seems unlikely, but if they do something like a really good like movie or a AAA video game, they could take that third place and push Marvel down to fourth place. It could be something crazy that ends up happening. Kind of a tinfoil hat theory there. But hey, let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Like and subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.